Today harnesses a lot of focus on the issue of violence against women, and what we've seen this year, and I went to the breakfast this morning where Rosie Batty spoke, and I've had the privilege of hearing her speak on a number of occasions this year and also having, thank you, some personal conversations with her. And I think what Rosie's appointment as Australian of the Year has done is start a national conversation about this issue. No longer is this an issue that's just seen as it happens to those women over there, or it's just about those women, those feminists are up and they're on their high horses again. It's actually about, we're starting to see really clearly, particularly through greater media representation and naming of the issue, what is actually going on in our communities, in our homes on a daily basis. One of the stats, and I'll show you I'll show you a little video at the end, a little YouTube, just to sort of harness this together. But I think this first stat says it all. Nationally, nearly one woman a week has been killed in this country as from her partner or ex-partner. The really sobering thought is that so far this year, that's nearly 2. Now, I get asked lots of questions about, is that because it's increasing? Is that because we know more about it and we're naming it that way? Is there factors that we're not aware of, etc.? I think it's because we're naming it as domestic violence related deaths. They're no longer going hidden. And one of the examples I use is, you may have heard in the media, the road rage murder. It was first reported in Queensland as a road rage. Now that would have just in past years gone through as road rage. But it very quickly was identified as a DV-related death. So we're naming it, we're hearing it, we're talking about it. And the key thing with any issue is you've got to have evidence, you've got to have data. Once you know what the problem is, you can actually harness resources. So these are the stats are being talked about generally today. You'll be hearing a lot in the media, etc. So I'm not going to focus too much. Just to say it's a huge problem, it's complex, it's been around forever. It's just that now we know and we're talking about it. It just hasn't happened all of a sudden because of, drug and alcohol and mental health and poverty and stresses and unemployment. It's been happening. It's just that we are now in an environment where people are talking about it. We have services, we have legislation. We don't have enough services, of course, but we're trying to also harness the broader community. So really clear message. It's been around forever in various forms. We just now know about it. Why does it occur? And this is a question I'm often asked. What we know, and you'll see some of this in the media today and throughout the coming weeks, is that it's actually linked strongly to gender inequality, and you from Power Networks, you touched on that. It's linked to a rigid adherence to gender roles, so what women should do and what men should do, and about attitudes and norms, behaviours and practices that support violence. So, for example, at the basis, it's about disrespect. It's about regarding women as second-class citizens and actually saying it's okay for men to have control of them, to dictate to them what they should do, what they should wear, whether they should work, all those sorts of processes. That's at the heart of what causes violence against women. And you just get onto a continuum where it ends up with overt sexual, physical, emotional, social, spiritual violence. I do that, but you'll have this. I'm happy to send the link out to the library and they can actually provide it. But if you go on the Victorian Health Foundation website, they'll have a heap of information around attitudes. They conduct a national community attitude survey as part of the national agenda, and they actually do it every 4 years, and their last survey was 2013, where there was some really concerning information about some of the very conservative attitudes around very young men that we're needing to sort of target programs towards. So there's 2 aspects that we're trying to get out, and certainly when I'm talking today, that I'm trying to focus on. One is what we can do if we're concerned that a colleague, friend, a family member is experiencing violence. People are unsure. They're not sure what they should do. They know they don't want to, they're concerned if they intervene, if they ask the question, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a police officer, I don't have the skills. What we're asking people to do is, if all they can do is to listen and believe, that's a great start. Because what women who experience and are living with this violence hear all too often is that they're at fault. They've done something wrong. That victim blaming is how we describe it. Questions are asked about, well, why doesn't she just leave? Why doesn't she leave? That is the most at-risk time for her being murdered. Also, if she leaves, it often means poverty, moving home, taking the kids out of school, losing jobs. So there's a whole range of issues about why a woman wouldn't leave. She also loves him, and he promises her to change. But at the heart of what we're trying to do around that end, connected with the victim blaming and trying to challenge that, is to shift it to re-asking the question about why does this happen? Why does he think it's okay to do that? Change the conversation, shift it to his responsibility. And why in society we think it's okay for attitudes to pervade that say that she's at fault, that question her legitimacy. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of the tweets and the commentary that has been directed at Rosie Batty from people like Mark Latham, where he's questioning her and blaming her and saying she's just making money out of this. She lost her son at the hands of her ex-partner, and she's at fault, and she's now trying to make money out of it. That's some of the attitudes that we need to stop, and we need to intervene. The other bit that I really want, where I think there's a greater role for people in the general community, is to challenge attitudes, to challenge sexism, to challenge discrimination. It's the sexist jokes you hear all too frequently, even this in 2015 in some workplaces, but in some of our community environments. Comments that downplay a woman's ability to participate in traditionally male endeavours. So some of the commentary about the first female footy umpire, some of the commentary that occurred with the first woman to win the Melbourne Cup. You know, some of the attacks on her because she responded and articulated what she'd experienced were horrendous. There's a role for us all to play in intervening and stopping that and challenging that behaviour and questioning. But today, in terms of White Ribbon, it's a role that we want men to play. Why do we want men to play such a role? Why do we think it's important that men should be part of this? Anybody?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about gender inequality and gender stereotypes, then a woman addressing a man for his attitudes towards women, he's not going to take it on board, is he? Because he's already got an entrenched attitude.
Yeah.
He may be more likely to listen to another man challenging him.
Yeah. Absolutely spot on. And you can have conversations with men that women can't. You know, that's why we want to harness men's role. You can have conversations that women just can't have. So we want to provide, and that's why White Ribbon Ambassadors are really critical. It's also why White Ribbon Ambassadors recognise that they're working after many, many years of women doing this alone. You know, we are now in the 40th year of women's domestic violence services in this state, and it's great that we've got them, and it's great that we're having this national conversation, but it's still a challenge for those frontline services to respond day in and day out. So we want men, what we know is we won't change the perpetration until we get into changing the attitudes. What we'll get is increased reporting that'll go consistent with prevalence rates, but it won't necessarily drop off unless we fundamentally change the way we interact in our community and how we view women's roles in our communities and how we share power and share decision making. So all of those sorts of things. I think what do you think stops people from intervening? Whether it's at the listen, believe, I see, I'm not sure about that, or it's about, oh, I heard that really crappy joke, it didn't feel comfortable, but I didn't do anything.
Fear of criticism.
Yep, fear of criticism. Most control positions in the community are wherever are male. Yeah. And you have those just rejected. Yep. So for a woman to intervene and question something, she often gets put down. No. Anything else? Do you think people know what to do, or they're fearful of what to do? What will come next, not knowing?
I reckon they're more fearful of fear, because of the fear factor.
Yeah.
You know, I know a couple of my mates are trying to talk to them, and there's that wall comes up in the fear.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's easy. You know, this is not easy stuff. Even for skilled, experienced counsellors at that very tippy end, it's hard, it's really difficult. But where it's less difficult and where we think everybody's got a role to play is around that disrespect, that attitudes, those conversations that happen, objectification of women, etc., etc., etc. And doing that with people you know, who you've already got an influence on and a relationship with, is also easier. So not expecting you to have those conversations with strangers. That's a whole other ball game. But I think it's about harnessing all our ability to, when we see or hear something that is in the realm of disrespectful, let's intervene. Because unless you do, you're condoning it, you're supporting it, you're enabling it to continue. And there's lots of leaders around this country. David Morrison, the former head of the army, is very clear about his position on that, both within, when he was heading up the army and also now as a private citizen. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And it's about actually harnessing all our ability. Where can you get assistance? So, if you're worried or concerned about a colleague, there is a range of players. You've got HR, you've got managers, there's the Office for Women, there's the Women's Information Service, there's 1800-RESPECT, which is a national 24/7 domestic sexual violence counselling line. It's free, it's for anybody. You don't have to be the victim or survivor. You can be a family member, you can be a work colleague, you can be a concerned friend. You can ring them at any time and actually seek some advice. They've also got materials on their website. So that's the first one that I would say. You can contact us if you need to, but also there will be resources in your own department or hopefully in your own workplaces. I'm not sure where you're all from. But people like Dave are a key resource to actually link in with, to actually provide that assistance and that support. I'm not even going to attempt to put this YouTube on, given the last one didn't quite work, but this is on an organisation's website called Watch, and essentially what it does is it encapsulates why we're talking about sexism, disrespect and gender inequality in relation to violence against women. And it's about a 4.5-minute YouTube video. I would highly recommend that if you're wanting to do any work in your workplace, or with any sporting groups, because I've used this time and time and time again, and sometimes you get tears in the audience because you've got kids talking about what they see. You've got kids talking about the life that they want. And you've got basically a call to action going out from key people in our community. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it there and just check if there's any sort of key questions before I hand over to Dave.
In those reasons which were on the first slide, why this happens, I attended another session on the same topic within our department, and we had people who had been affected by domestic violence speak, and the main reason which was brought up was none of those, but it was economic empowerment, which women do not have.
That's about gender inequality. That's part of gender inequality.
Is it?
Yeah. Women not having access to economic independence is actually a contributor to gender inequality, so that's how we would view it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a broad term.
Yeah. And look, in terms of information, next steps, if you want to go on the Office for Women website, we've got a heap of information under the Women's Safety page. We've got links to all these sort of key resources. We've got statistical information. More than happy to help and link you in with the other key players around the state in South Australia. Is everybody a public sector employee? No? We've got some ones. Well, today the Premier did announce 15 days domestic violence leave in additional to our existing public service entitlements as part of this issue. And he also announced, which will be more pertinent for the broader peak workforce, is a development of another law reform discussion paper around domestic violence, looking particularly at a law called Clare's Law in the UK, but we call it a domestic violence disclosure scheme. So we can provide you links to that information. We don't get very many bites of the cherry with law, So we need to harness them as much as we can. So I'm going to leave it there and say thank you. I hope that's given you a little bit of a snapshot. It's hard to do it in 10 to 15 minutes. And I'll hand over to Dave.
Thank you.
I will take off.
Thank you.
Like Fiona, I've created a few notes for me to actually speak to on. Thank you and welcome. It's great that you've taken time out on this day, White Ribbon Day, and I'm often asked, why did I become a workplace advocate for White Ribbon? I work with SafeWork SA. My role is the team manager for the compliance and enforcement team, and predominantly with construction. As I just said, today is White Ribbon Day, but the other 364 days should be the other days where we're thinking about and eradicating men's violence against women. It's all well and good that this day is promoted, and it's fantastic because, as Fiona said, and she was quite rightfully so, this has only come to prominence over the last 10 years. This has been fought for over many, many years throughout ages in Australia by women, for women, against men who perpetrate that violence. And as she stated, it's violence of an economic kind. It's violence on a spiritual kind. It's not so much violence on a physical kind. There is many, many other ways that violence can affect a relationship. And also, if they've got children, they affect the children. And where it comes to work, it comes to a workplace. It's where my role as an advocate in my workplace, that people can come up to and have a discussion with me. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a person that'll know all the answers. But I'm someone where someone can go at their workplace to talk to in confidence, and I'm able to provide them with the necessary assistance of where and how and what is the next step. And sometimes it's a very hard first step to get to the next step because it's so... I've heard many stories of people who feel abandoned, who feel alone, who feel they're not worthless, but they're worthless. And it's that type of empowerment that just coming and doing that first step to actually acknowledge that there is a problem is somewhere where, as Fiona has stated, that we need to listen. We don't decide. We don't make judgment. We help them get to the next step. And that next step is professional help. And there is much, much out there for us to give those women who are in such need of those particular situations. But the reason why I probably became an advocate is because, well, it saddens me in the generational impact that domestic violence has on our community as a whole. I'm angered, you know, by the, as Fiona said, about the inequality inherent in our community, which is fundamentally at the core of this violence. And it's violence against women, which is our collective, and everybody out there, responsibility to address. It's time that we all say enough is enough when it comes to this. When you're talking to your friends, when you're talking to your colleagues, when you're talking to your family, of wide family, it's about saying enough is enough. We're all equal. We're equal on this planet. It's like the husband who tells the daughter or the son, don't cry like your sister. Why not cry like your sister? It's crying. It's not about anything else. They're crying for a reason. They're crying because they're hurt. They're crying because something upsets them. It's not about crying like your sister. And that's where it starts. So we must get into talking to these male, young men who are on the next threshold to going into familyhood, who want to find a lovely lady to settle down with, to join her family, and to be able to put that in perspective of bringing that generational change, because we've come into this generation where we know, and you, sir, you said that, you know, you've spoken to some of your friends and they're trying to put that wall up. Well, we want to see in the future And it may not be next year, it may not be in 10 years, but let's say it's 20 years. That same person like yourself hears that, they all stop and tell that person. And that's where we have this hope, that this is why these days are special, but so are every day, and every day for the whole year is very special. We all came from mothers. We love our mothers. She is a woman. There's no difference between her and another elder lady at your workplace who is suffering silence or changes attitudes or anything like that. Sisters, daughters, etc. We need to look after them for the future. And it's time for us to do whatever we can. We must focus on stopping the violence. We must focus by getting out there, educating. That's how we start. We start by educating, giving them the actual reasons why we should be doing this, giving them the actual how we would be able to do it. Do our best to support and care for people who have suffered violence. Be that listening factor, as I said before. Teaching our young men that it's not okay to control women. And that's through either violence, threats of violence, or like I said before, economics, any type of thing of just keeping them by any other means. And as we spoke before, we know it is uncomfortable sometimes when you're having this conversation, and it will be uncomfortable. And as Fiona stated, it's about, you don't have to go to see a complete stranger. If you feel up to it, of course you will. You feel comfortable. But start on your wide-ranging with family. Start on your work colleagues that your peers, etc. And if you hear these things, then encourage those women who experience violence to speak out. Men who do not know what appropriate. There's some people out there that they don't know it's not appropriate to talk like this, or it's not appropriate to do this, to actually provide them and get them to speak up and seek help. And show that our daughters and sons, as I've said before, that there's a different way of interacting. These are all inside myself, the reason why I wanted to be one of these advocates. And I want every man in this room, as well as going and speaking to their mates, to become one of these. Take it upon yourself in your workplace, have a look at the white ribbon, take the oath, and I'm sure you all have taken the oath, to stop this violence happening out. And as I've stated before, it's every person's responsibility, and particularly ours as leaders. We're leaders of our family. Your wife's a leader of the family. So we start discussing that in that family. You start discussing it in your community. You start discussing it in your football community, or your tennis, or anywhere you'd like to discuss it. So we stop and we challenge stereotypes. We name sexism. We speak up if we hear excuses for violence. There's no excuses for violence. And we spread the word that violence is never an option. It's no excuse, and it's not an option, and it's not warranted. And in finishing, domestic violence is a bullying, self-serving behaviour that seeks to put people down and seeks in the very perverse way to raise the perpetrator's own self-esteem in some self-deluded way. We can't get a grip on why they do that. I believe we won't ever know that, because for some reason there are people that decide to do it because they're in a deluded state. But as I've said before, and I'm very passionate about this, it's completely unacceptable, abhorrent, and it needs to be eradicated now. So finally, I wholeheartedly believe that we will all be able to work together in good faith and do whatever we can to eliminate the domestic violence here in our community, in the state, everywhere that you can actually spread the word and educate. And I look forward, as I've said before, of being the voice of SafeWork SA, because I'm so passionate about it. And I thank you for listening to me. If there's any questions about my role at the workplace, I'm open to take those questions. I'm 6'2", 6'3". I've been around. I was a builder's labourer. I've left days. I drove tower cranes, etc. I know what it's like. But it's just, I have a daughter. I have a lovely wife. My mother passed away last year, but I've got sisters. It's abhorrent that this thing is around, and it's abhorrent that it's still going on, and we can't get people to actually stand up and start to eradicate it. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time out today on this wonderful day. But remember, it's 365 days is a white ribbon day. I'm thinking of eradicating violence. Thank you very much.